Hey guys, Jim at Rainwater Equipment and Rain Harvesting Supplies here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about sanitation and water treatment as it applies to a rainwater harvesting system. And I'm here representing ARCSA, which is the American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association. It's a national organization that's based on all things rainwater harvesting and rainwater collection. It's made up of industry professionals who are either involved in the industry and education. It could be an equipment supplier, an installer, a manufacturer. Lots of people who come together to talk about rainwater harvesting and share ideas. There is a national conference that's held annually with this group of folks, and so I encourage you to check out ARCSA, ARCSA.org, to find out more information about that. Chapter 14 in the manual is called Sanitation and Water Treatment, and I'm going to spend some time talking about how that works with rainwater harvesting. Typically, the best thing to do whenever you're collecting rainwater is filter your water in stages. You don't want to try to do it all at once at the point of use. So there's a number of different kinds of sanitation treatments that you can use, but I can tell you that from experience, the most common is ultraviolet light treatment in a rainwater system. Reverse osmosis, ozone treatment, and a few others have been known to be used, but they're not nearly as common as UV. So that's what I'm going to spend time talking about today. When you catch rainwater off of your roof, and that's how it has to be done, is you're storing it in a collection tank. The water will hit a roof as it's coming down from the sky, and that water will go into a gutter and either be filtered at the gutter, or at the downspout, or at the top of the tank, or in all three of those locations. So again, you want to make sure you filter in stages. Here's an example of a Leaf Blaster Pro stainless steel filter guard that would go on top of your gutter. If you have one of these installed, then you can get away without having some other things like a downspout filter, like a leaf eater, for example. And these are all made out of stainless steel. That's for a 5-inch gutter. A leaf eater is a less expensive option for you to put under your downspout. And if you're collecting off of multiple downspouts, which is the case with many large systems, then you have to put one of these under each downspout if you're not using some sort of a leaf guard like the Leaf Blaster Pro. At the point of the tank, at the top where the water enters, you'll have a filter basket. It'll most likely look something like this with a stainless steel mesh. These things come in lots of different options. This one, like I said, stainless steel mesh. Here's a light guard that you can get that's an optional product that prevents the growth of algae inside your storage tank. It does allow water to go through, but the filter basket then would sit on top of your tank, replacing the lid, keeping the sunlight out, and this would be your another point where you're filtering water in stages. Here's one that's a nylon basket that's really common, that just drops down inside, and your lid can actually screw on top of this basket. There's a larger one back here for larger lid sizes. And some of the nicer metal tanks, Pioneer, for example, offers one here that has a handle, and it's all stainless steel mesh. So these are great. You just drop them down inside the lid, screw the lid back on, and this is a great way to filter water before it goes into your water tank. Now, whenever the water comes into the tank, well, before I go to that point, a first flush diverter is something that you might consider using with your rainwater harvesting system. They are products that will essentially take that first wash of dirt that may come off of and sediment that comes off of your roof, and will divert it away from your water tank. And the way it works is it fills up a pipe that's adjacent to your water storage tank, and then in theory, the way it's supposed to work is that pipe fills up with that first wash of water that will be the dirtiest, rather than allowing it to go into your tank. There'll be a ball inside that pipe that floats up to the top, and then the water gets diverted into the storage tank once that pipe is full. First flush diverters are very common, but they're certainly not essential in your rainwater collection system. We don't use one here. at our facility, but a lot of people do. So that's another thing you might consider. As the water enters the tank, it will stir up whatever's in the bottom of the tank, which will be sediment predominantly. And you might use something called a calming inlet that when the water goes into your water tank, rather than just having it hit the bottom of the tank and stir up all that sediment, there is a device that can be attached to the bottom of a pipe as it goes in that looks a little bit like a dog bowl, frankly. And it will go in one side and out the other and disperse the water rather than stirring up all the sediment on the bottom. Inside the tank is another option that I would highly recommend, is a floating intake or floating suction filter. That's going to be something like this. This is a 1.5 inch version, and it has a stainless steel filter on the end with a ball that's going to float just below the surface of the water. So this flexible hose has a threaded attachment here on the other end that's going to screw into the inside of the bottom of your tank. And again, once that water in the tank enters from the rain, then this will float, and anytime your pump turns on, most systems use pumps, the water will be pulled through this filter before it goes into your pump, again staging down that filtration. So you've got your filtration at the gutter, potentially at the downspout, at the top of the tank, inside the tank, and then with your floating filter before it goes into your pump. Once the water then comes in, like it does here on this particular system, into your pipe and into your pump, it will go up and into a sediment filter. This is a 3-stage UV treatment system made by a company called Trojan, and this is one of their brands called Viqua. Another brand that we carry that is also a Canadian manufacturer is the Luminor product. They're essentially accomplish the same thing. They're orientated a little bit differently, but water essentially comes in on one side, out the other, and then through the UV. Now, the first housing will have a sediment cartridge in it, and this is a wall mount unit. Both of these are, to where it's really a plug and play, where you just mount it on the wall, you plumb it in on the left, and it comes out on the right. You don't have to do it this way. You can individually install filter housings and connect them with piping and fittings, and then go through a UV system prior to delivering the water to your point of use. But these are just so much easier, and frankly, most installers choose to go with these for ease of use and to save time, and they accomplish all three filtration needs, the first being the sediment filter. So inside this housing, or inside of this housing in the Luminor system, you'll find a sediment filter. It will remove any dirt or dust that's in the system prior to sending it into your home. Here's one I replaced recently after about 6 months of use on a Rainwater system, and you can see how dirty it is. It started off looking white like the one in the packaging, and now it's dirty and will need to be discarded and replaced. When you replace your filter cartridges, you need to do so not whenever based on a time period, but based on a drop in pressure. So you'll notice that I have a pressure gauge here. Liquid filled pressure gauges work really well on the inlet and on the outlet side of this system. Whenever you notice a drop in pressure on the discharge side of your system, that generally indicates that you've got an issue with your filter cartridges and they need to be changed out. Recently, I noticed, we were running about 45 PSI here at the facility, and we noticed a drop in pressure on this second gauge to around 25 PSI, and that's when we removed these cartridges and found that the sediment filter needed to be replaced. The second housing is where your carbon filter will go. You'll often heard referred to as a carbon block filter. So these are used to eliminate funny tastes in the water or any sort of weird smells or odors that may be present. And so 5 to 10 to 20 micron is often a size that you'll hear. 10 micron seems to be the most common, and this again goes in the second housing. This is what the one looked like when we replaced it recently, and give you some indication of kind of what to expect when you change these filter cartridges. Inside of the stainless steel chamber is a glass, or what they call a quartz tube. The glass tube goes down inside the chamber vertically, and same thing on the Luminor system, except that Luminor's is horizontal. There's a glass tube that runs through here, and inside of that glass tube is a lamp. This lamp actually came out of this system. You can see that it's about the same length. And when the water comes across the system, passes across the glass tube, this lamp is protected, and the ultraviolet light shines, and it's always on, so that anytime that you're using water, it's going to be treated. And what UV does is it deactivates bacteria present in the system, which prevents it from essentially growing more bacteria. It deactivating it keeps it from reproducing, I guess is a better way to say it. So once that's deactivated, the water coming out of the faucet here, or the spigot, is then safe to drink. This puts off like I said, the light stays on all the time. When the water crosses, it has to do so in a certain rate of speed in gallons per minute. And you'll see these will often be rated at GPM. So for a system, for example, that may accommodate 10 to 12 gallons per minute, you don't want to allow the water coming from your pump to pass across this glass quartz tube faster than what the UV can treat the water. So the industry standard is 30 millijoules per centimeter squared is how it's referred to. And then there is an NSF standard 55 that's a higher rating for Class A systems you may run into from time to time, and that is at 40 millijoules per centimeter squared is the treatment dosage, if you will. So 30 millijoules per centimeter squared is what we're after, and that's what these systems will do. In this particular case, these systems are generally rated at 12 to 15 gallons per minute on the two that I'm looking at here. Luminor's is actually rated at 15. I think the Viqua is rated at about the same. But what you'll find is that with the carbon filters that go inside of these things tend to limit the flow rate. So you probably won't ever get anything higher than 15 gallons per minute through these units anyway, because of the restrictive nature of the carbon filter. Now, if you have a system that doesn't have any sort of a restriction on it that allows the flow rate to essentially go as fast as the pump can produce, you'll want to install a flow restrictor. They come in stainless steel typically, and you can put them on the discharge side. I don't have one installed on this system, but it will prevent the water from flowing through your UV system faster than the UV light can treat the water, essentially. So if you've got a system, let's say, that's doing 20 to 40 gallons per minute, and your pump is capable of producing that or higher flow rates, then you definitely want to install a flow restrictor to make sure it gets the proper amount of dosage. So the light that's on the inside of the unit is replaced annually, and in both of these systems there's a counter on the controller that will count down typically from 365 days, although Luminor has one that will last a little longer than that. And you'll get an audible indication when it's time, and a visual one when it's time to change the lamp. So when that happens, you need to depressurize your system. And that's why it's always important to install a spigot on the discharge side of this system, so that when it's time to change it, you can go over here and close your ball valves to stop the pump from sending pressurized water through the system. And then you want to use your spigot to bleed the water off, and the pressure off of the system, before you try to change the cartridges. If you don't, you're going to essentially have a mess, because you'll start trying to take this apart and water will spray everywhere, and you don't want that. Same thing with the lamp. If you were to not depressurize before you started trying to change the lamp, the pressure can force this lamp to shoot out of the top of the system and break. And we've had that happen in instances in freezing temperatures where these systems weren't properly insulated or inside of a inside of a building. Instead, they were left exposed to the elements where it dropped below, significantly below freezing for several days in a row. And once that happens, you're going to potentially have problems. So you don't want to allow that to happen to your system. These come with wrenches that will slide up and go around the ring here on the cartridges, on the housings, that lets you change the cartridges as needed. The Luminor systems have one as well, and theirs also slides up and does the same thing. Again, the Luminor system is unique in that you can mount it vertically or horizontally. I shouldn't say that. You can mount it from right to left or left to right is what I should have said. So as the water comes through here on the left, you're going through the sediment filter, the carbon filter, then the water makes its way through the stainless steel chamber. But if you decided for, based on your plumbing requirements or the way you wanted to run your piping, that it would work better the other way, you can simply unclamp this and switch this unit around. But when you do that, you have to remember that you got to change your cartridges, because remember, your sediment filter is on the left and your carbon filter is on the right. So you got to switch those around if you change the orientation of the way that this unit is installed. So let's see, what else do we need to cover here on chapter 14? I guess let's just do a recap, and that is that, again, you're staging your filtration down. You don't want to allow this unit to simply capture all of the debris, essentially, that's going to be coming from your rainwater system into your tank, and then having it basically be this as your first line of defense. It will still work, but what's going to happen is that these are going to need to be changed much more frequently, because you're not filtering water in stages before it gets to this point. Instead, you're allowing this to be your first filter to stop everything, and that's not good. Also, you will get debris inside of your pump, and in many cases, if you don't have a floating filter like I showed earlier, or an inline filter that has a screen in it, a stainless steel screen that collects a lot of that debris before it goes into your pump, you're going to have problems with your pump. And you don't want to spend a lot of money on a system and equipment that you're not properly installing to take care of that sort of thing. So filtration is incredibly important, up to the point where you have your UV. But again, ultraviolet light is the most common treatment for collecting rainwater and for treating water to make it potable. These are used frequently in residential applications where you've got folks that live on a piece of property that is probably out of the city limits. They may not have a reliable water supply. They may have a well that is not producing with enough flow and pressure that is needed, or they may have tried drilling wells and have had no success. And in that case, rainwater collection may be a viable option for that user. And when that happens, you've got to essentially treat your system like it's your only source of water, because it may be. Some people like to supplement with rainwater because it has such a high nitrogen content. It's great for watering your plants. And the coolest thing about rainwater that people don't realize is that it is incredibly tasty, I guess I should say. Drinking rainwater it's a better taste than any other water out there, bottled water included. And you should, if you take a look at, I've got some photos that I put on the ARCSA Facebook page and the ARCSA website, I believe. You could probably also find them on rainwaterequipment.com. The day that we switched over from well water to rainwater on this particular system, you can see a distinct difference between the ice cubes and the way that they look in the tray. The ice cubes from the well water are cloudy, filled with impurities. It's still safe to drink because well water typically is, but it has that sulfur smell, a bit of a rotten egg smell to it. It will foul out your appliances much quicker. We found that we were replacing dishwasher, coffee pots, anything that well water had to go through in order to to be used. Those products were having a shorter life. Once we switched over to rainwater, you get a nice, clear, good tasting water that does not have impurities, And you know, it's great to, it's just such a huge difference when you drink it, when you take showers, when you run it through your appliances. You'll find that rainwater is just really much better than any other water, including city water. So with that, I'll wrap things up. Again, this is Jim Wood with Rainwater Equipment and Rain Harvesting Supplies, coming to you on Chapter 14 here of the ARCSA Manual, Sanitation and Water Treatment. You may find out more information about all things rainwater on the ARCSA website, arcsa.org, or check us out at rainwaterequipment.com.